Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to CommonTime One-on-One. My name is Michael Skillern. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator here with CommonTime. And as you know, CommonTime is your all-inclusive home for increased access to arts education, where we live to take artists, individuals, arts organizations, and educators and kind of meld them together in a cohesive community through this ecosystem that we're trying to build here at Common Time. The Common Time one-on-one interview series is our effort to better connect those different stakeholders by interviewing people like Patrick Kabanda, who we have today, the people that I call the movers and shakers, the people that are really making it happen in the arts, the people whose stories need to be heard in ways that can better support the people that are invested in our platform here. Today, we have Patrick Kabanda. He is an author, an organist, which the organ's actually one of my favorite instruments. I saw that you've been to Juilliard, you graduated from Tufts, your work on kind of creative economics, especially that you describe in your book, The Cultural Wealth of Nations, are all things. I think your book's available on Amazon right now. So I want to put that out
Yeah,
there so that people can find it.
yes.
And I personally think that you're super interesting. And I can tell you that growing up in the States, my idea of a nation's wealth was taught to me to be derived from natural resources. And we were taught that countries that have a lack of these type of resources are poor. But in having a few different conversations with you, learning about your book and learning about that concept of the creative economy, it's really opened my eyes to exactly what that word wealth means. Patrick is going to be giving a really interesting session at our April 30th Educator Summit. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about what you're going to present then. That'll hopefully be a little bit of a teaser for us. And you are available for sessions now on commontime.online. Right up here in the top left under the artist tab, you can find them. So, Patrick, I want to ask you first, and I ask this, I want you to answer honestly. How are you doing? Are you doing okay?
Oh, Michael, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here.
Of course.
In terms of how I'm doing, if I want to be honest, I'd rather be home in Uganda.
Me
But,
too.
maybe Wakanda would even be better. But, I'm here in Washington, D.C. Area, and the Washington, D.C. area. And I'm generally fine considering what's happening around the world in Ukraine and other things. Some people haven't survived the pandemic. In many ways. So I can't complain. And thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah. To get started, I want to talk about the book, The Creative Wealth of Nations. And I have not read the book, I'll tell you that honestly. But my idea of what it's about and what I have seen about the book is that it's about how different countries can kind of use their cultures, their history, their creative exports to kind of build up this cultural export that makes them unique. And it's one of the more unique things that a country can give to the world outside of natural resources or other things like that. And that was a really novel concept to me. Could you just maybe talk about the book and that idea of the creative economy?
But yeah, so what you talked about earlier, I think in your introductory remarks, touches on what the book is all about. In that, even me growing up, Uganda was known for copper and coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And these natural resources, in fact, even the roads which were built were always leading to these places to extract natural resources. But if you look at it, and many people have said this, it's not just me, Africa is one of the wealthiest places in the world
Right.
in terms of natural resources, but has that translated into meaningful, equitable development for everyone? I don't think you need to go to heaven to get a clear answer. Right here on earth, you can see that it has not really done basically a job which we should expect to bring everyone out of poverty. In fact, sometimes these natural resources are part of a problem. You see this situation in Congo, and which I think some people have called a resource curse, in that people go there to extract minerals, get natural resources, and entire livelihoods are really, really
Yeah.
destabilized or exploited, or worse, even just erased. So I think that it's not really just what you have in terms of natural resources, but what you can do with it in a meaningful way is what's important. And that's why actually the arts come in, because I think the arts are there, and it's to do with imagination. Okay, and what can we do with the resources we have? And in addition to these natural resources, people do have the music, they do have the art, and this doesn't have to, it's within the culture. So it's very easy to see how we can get this and make it an export commodity, or even improve relationship with countries. So here in the Washington D.C. area, I'll tell you, for example, when I go to all these embassies, most of them don't tell me that they are manufacturing this kind of car or they are doing this and that.
Right.
In as much as they will tell me about their culture, this is our poet, this is our music, the famous paintings and stuff, the food.
Mm-hmm.
So most of them really try so hard to showcase this kind of concepts, in that culture is really the anchor of what all these countries are all about, or who they are,
Right.
or who the people. Yes.
So how can, and I'm in Dubai, and not to
Yes.
offend any of the Emirati people, but I used to live in China, and when you walk down the street in China, you are so clearly not anywhere else. From the
Yes.
random temples, just to the way people are living their lives, to the storefronts, it's so uniquely China, and I feel that that part of their cultural heritage attracts people, it attracts visitors, etc. But when I'm in Dubai, people, you will hear expats say that the Emirati culture is a very difficult culture to observe. There,
Mm.
there's not a lot of old here. There's a handful of forts here and there. There are sometimes traditional events where they may have food or dancing or clothing involved, but it's a very difficult culture to observe. So, with my next question, I'm thinking about where I'm living now, and I want to ask you, how can different communities better showcase, have more appreciation for, and like better capitalize off of their cultural heritage? Because it definitely makes sense to be when Dubai was making their transition to what they are now. The British don't care about Yola dancing. The British care about putting an HSBC branch there so they can start loaning money to Brits to start making investments there. So, how can the
Yes.
next Dubai, for example, kind of capitalize off their cultural heritage instead of relying solely on natural or purely financial resources?
Yeah, I mean, and again, actually, this to do with changing a mindset and shifting a mindset and realizing what these countries have, or these regions have. It has to be said though, that I've had now, I've not spent a lot of time in the Middle East or around that area to tell, except dashing through airports. I've been to Egypt a number of times, so but the context may be different. What I'm realizing, I think they are putting in a lot of investments in culture initiatives. So in
Mm.
different regions there, and this is something what they're investing more time into and trying to understand what they are doing. But I think they could do more, and then also they are realizing that transition from oil to other places,
Right.
to other things is quite important. So, but I think one of the very big concepts to realize how to take this seriously. Increase arts education in schools. Okay, you can certainly teach Shakespeare and English, but teach Arabic and teach
Mm-hmm.
traditional culture. And then the other thing to do is that in terms of hotels, one actually philosopher had mentioned in their book called Arts Therapy, that sometimes the first place to actually notice culture is hotels. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So when you go to hotels, put postcards, pamphlets. So when people come in, the first thing they see is actually the culture of your own country, not just this very kind of blanketed
Right.
universal image, which I find in Uganda and I can find it in Thailand. I can find it in. It's almost like the Macdonization thesis. Okay?
Hmm.
So how can you have unique things which people can see? And I think, quite honestly, some people have tried this so much, but not just at a corporate level, but definitely really being this being so much in terms of a social fabric. And I don't know about basically the Arab culture that much, but I know in Uganda we are bitten to speak our own languages on campus. And I think you recently had a session on indigenous or local languages.
Hmm.
But if you spoke Luganda when I was growing up, it would be white, bitten, okay? So how can you promote more native languages to be taught? Arabic and all its variation, the music to be showcased. Okay? And you have movies. I always see this concept, which I complained about one time when I was in Thailand, that you go see a movie about some place, okay? But all the music which comes out is almost coming from Hollywood or someplace.
Right.
There's no showcase traditional music. Yet
Hmm.
music for me is a soundtrack, which is also part of the story, and you should let us listen to that. It gives us, teach us something new. So this has to be changed. The trouble, which I think you hinted on, is that everyone goes to the same business school. They study the same business concepts. They know this has to be done. It's like this template,
Right.
except for a very few. They are there. I'm not trying to say they are who see the bigger picture, but I think there's an opportunity to try to change the narrative, and these countries can do that. Yes.
There's two things I was thinking while you were saying that is you may have heard Dubai had the expo,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
was
I've heard of
speaking with a college professor out here, and his college I think was opened by a royal, so kind of the leadership people of that college have some type of relationship with government officials at different times.
it.
They were trying to find Emirati people to perform at Expo, but who did they find? No one. And they were asking why. And they realized
Wow.
that the national schools don't have music.
Yes.
And that's why, like, why is Christina Aguilera doing the closing ceremony of the biggest event in the Arab world? And
Exactly.
you know what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
Yeah.
Why is Nora Jones headlining the
Yes.
biggest showcase of Arab talent in the last X years, And then I thought when you talked about native languages and increasing their importance, I read an article recently that was saying the elite class in Qatar has been experiencing this. I won't necessarily call it a problem, but this phenomenon where the children are growing up, they're going to British international schools, okay? They graduate, they go to Cambridge, Oxford, maybe they get a graduate degree, they get a job, and then they come home and they can barely speak Arabic to their grandmother.
Mm.
And it just made me think, at what cost? At what cost are we going to
Mm.
get the money? At what
Yeah.
cost are we going to modernize? At what cost? And one thing that I think is interesting, an interesting parallel, that America doesn't have very many distinct cultures because they were kind of a
Mm.
melting pot in their origin. They don't
Mm.
have very many distinct cultures. Of course, jazz, bluegrass, rock and roll, maybe Hollywood. But I'm
Mm.
seeing a lot of countries that are actually breeding out their distinct cultures.
Mm.
And I think that's a very interesting concept because you can go do everything in the world, but if you can't have a conversation with your grandmother, it's just like at what cost?
Yes.
At what cost? Yeah. When we talk about cultural and historic exports, I'm from the South, so I'm from Georgia. And I
Yes.
feel like um, the Civil War and post Civil War statues, architecture, buildings, et cetera, is a big part of the cultural heritage of my area But now that America's mindset has shifted and their morals have shifted to other things, how can
Mm.
different communities still invest in their cultural heritage while also accepting kind of that paradigm shift? Because if you follow the news, like one of the big topics in the South is they're tearing down a lot of statues. They're renaming a lot of
Mm.
buildings named after Confederate generals. So someone who is a Southerner could read your text and say, well, they won't let us do that here. They're erasing our culture. So how can kind of these cultural economies still shift and be fluid when, thoughts are changing like that?
Yeah, the way I think I would tackle that is to argue that, not always, because culture is broad. It's a huge, we are really now talking about music and languages, but it can be many things. And each culture, definitely there are things you could get rid of. I'm not proud of the fact that, even if I love a lot of things from Saudi Arabia, including their wonderful rice, and I think also some of these fruits which they pack really quite nicely. Some of the things are really great, and that, but I can't understand why the women won't be let to drive cars. Okay,
Right.
I think women. I think it's changing, but it's definitely. I think a woman could be your mother. She needs your permission. Or is it? You
Right.
understand? I think some of the issues. We, those of us who are abroad, may not know the whole picture, but these kinds of things bother you. And I think cultural progress. Me, when talking of culture, those are some of the things we should get rid of. I mean, women drive many countries and they are fine. And
Right.
it's something, it's okay. So I think there's even if we stretch back to Afghanistan, why should girls go to school? Because of this strong cultural belief. They should go to school. We are all better off. But you can't really say, oh, it's our culture that women cannot be, going to school and sitting with men in the same class. Really, if I want to go far, it's nonsense. Okay? So the same concept, let's shift it to the south, okay? So that these monuments, because that has been going on quite here intensely. There are people who were slave owners,
Mm-hmm.
and someone was this slave owner who really did a lot of that, and they have this huge statue. Why should that statue keep on being there?
Right.
When people have, when we know now it was not right, it's time to correct that mistake and put someone, who is different. Maybe Michael's great parents were better. They used to provide water to the needless,
Mm-hmm.
to people who are needed, and they did a lot of things, but maybe because you're African Americans, you were never recognized. Okay,
They need a
or maybe
statue.
they, yeah, and then now maybe it's time to shift that and let's put them on the statue. And I think these are some of the um, basically kind of concepts I want to talk about that issue. And well, I think one of the things you probably maybe you were hinting on, you see now there's this battle in classrooms not to teach some of the parts of history. Okay? In my view, I think it's a mistake. And I think that we all have to teach even the things which are uncomfortable. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather was a slave owner. It doesn't do me good to erase that. I need to know that, and I see how I come to terms with it. It can take an emotional toll, but even if I had nothing to do with it, it's just helpful to know and how we can shift our understanding of the world and even ourselves. I don't have to feel like just walking around feeling guilty or that people shouldn't talk about it and stuff. And actually, human psychology always don't want to talk about things which remind us of bad things, okay, or
Right.
hard. Generally, that's the way it is. So I think that is in fact these books can be written, and the United States can be a model for teaching countries of how to actually come from darkness to light. Okay, for example, the museum in Washington, D.C., the African American Museum, collecting some of these pieces of information artifacts could be another way to go there. I don't know if they are charging or it's free, but even if they don't charge, the economic activity which it can generate people coming from all over to come to see these places is there. And also the image, the changing of things. And someone could be in Saudi Arabia and want to write a thesis on American slavery and comes here to study, and that's an economic exchange of some sort, even based on just the fact that they are also acquiring some sort of knowledge and seeing it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because even I think we still have modern slavery, and I think that kind of area you are in is not, I think is always in the news for stories like that. They pop up here and there. You probably see that.
Right.
So how can your area teach us to see how can we move on from this? And then this slave um, uh, sort of owners, or actually in this case, the slaves themselves, contributed in a way that they brought the food, the music and stuff, and that music, of course, now is part of jazz and the blues and all that, and that can be celebrated. I don't really see why Georgia could not start. Maybe they have even done this to try to start a center where people could go and try to understand how all this music to go together was put together and how it has influenced America. And this can be part of a curriculum. And even some sort of exchanges, which I think the group called Sweet Honey in the Rock in the United States has done that. I had them in Uganda a long time ago. Groups from Georgia could be part of a university or other places, cultural institutions can be part of this. And I think it's a positive thing to be like, let's all have a conversation around this. Not that we are just looking to make money out of it or commodify it, but actually to understand history and what happened and what can we learn to move on in a better way. That's, I think, my short way I would tackle that.
Yeah. One a conversation I had with so when I was teaching in China, these students have to do something called a meta project each year, which is where we help them set some goal. Like people would set goals like, I want to learn to play basketball. I've never really played. And then they would spend the whole year designing a course of action. And then by the end of the year, they would give a presentation where, we had a student one year translate the official NBA rules into Chinese and Korean, and he created videos to go along with each one. That was like this, it was kind of like a how-to guide, and by the end of that year, he had learned basketball. So this one student, his project stood out to me because he said, I want to study racism in China. And I was so surprised because that's not something that they talk about there. Like when you go to China, everything's perfect, right? That's what you see and hear. And I asked him, I said, well, how did you get to this? Because you're Chinese, so I don't think you've ever been, maybe someone has been classist towards you, but I don't think anyone's ever been racist towards you. This is what I'm thinking. Yes. He said from watching basketball, he kept seeing the words on the back of the players' jerseys, and he finally looked it up one time and said, I wonder if they do that here. And then in his research, he found that they did. And it was just watching him go through this process. And then he started reaching out to the Koreans and some of the Southeast Asians at our school and interviewing them on how they get treated. And he was like blown away that people were not getting treated the same as him. And that entire year of work was started by the different initiatives by the NBA, where I don't know if you watch basketball, but during 2020, they would have things on, instead of their name, it would say like end racism or education for all or protect black people. And then like on the side of the court, it said like, might say Black Lives Matter, or it might say something to that effect. And that was a conversation all started by an organization not running away from that history. And who knows, maybe one day this kid becomes president of China and everyone's equal. You just don't know. You don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, that's a very important example you have mentioned there. And I think that's where, in my view, it's very dangerous to always look at the world in terms of just money and financial terms. Because I can see you, Michael, I'm paying you $10 million because they make a lot of money to play basketball, but I treat you like a commodity, like you are like a little machine,
right?
Which you're part of the system, and I don't care. as long as you function to produce the production. Yeah, but you are not, for me, you are less a human being. It's terrible. Um, and I think that it's one of the reasons why we are getting into these issues where people still make a lot of money, but they feel like something is missing. In fact, there's a completely different topic, but I look at the United States and like, okay, will this finally tell us a big, or teach us something very, very big? Right now, for example, the economy is coming out of COVID. You probably have heard for the past 40 years, the highest economic productivity growth which they've seen in the last 40 years. Of course, they have inflation, but in terms of, if you just look at economic, the jobs, are growing, and basically the number of joblessness, I think, is decreasing, and things like that. In terms of a financial system, things are going there. But when you read things about what's going on, the culture wars, they don't teach in the class, or you make me feel guilty, or things like, okay, the Supreme Court Justice Miss Jackson, the judge who's now just nominated, some of her comments which were made, whether they are justified or not, you can see that there's a very, very sharp divide of, and what's very funny, that some people in the opposition are part of a party which controls the largest majority. I think it's
Right.
6-3, but still, even this one little person is actually just going to replace someone, is they rather have none of, don't rule with her at all. So these are issues nothing to do with money. But there's this thing of insecurity of thinking, oh, maybe I will change my status, or they're going to eat my lunch or something. I really don't know. But I think just going with just the financial metrics is terrible. But I think if you look at things in terms of fairness, so if someone goes to play basketball in China and they just paid so much money, but then they are spat on, or they are treated, they are people calling them, and it really is not healthy. Okay?
Right.
And I would take that there was a story I had that when Obama just became president, and I was at Andover then, and I remember taking it to the person who was in charge of the office of the university, and the newspapers were going, that some of the articles were like something like this: oh, America is crazy, see? They just invaded Iraq and did a terrible job. And now, after they elected a black man to be president, this is quite really disturbing. Can you believe this? So
Right.
equating Barack Obama's, because he's black, to not even to mention Barack Obama's mom is white, to invading Iraq. So like this, and recent cases where you find that even some going from China, some of black soccer players, which is football in many parts around other places of the world, in Europe, also face, they may be paid well, but some of them feel like this is not the best treatment they are facing. And people with a knee, bowing down with a knee here in the United States, because there's this kind of thinking. And I think even that people started to bow down on a knee before George Floyd was even murdered. Isn't that? I think that was the case.
Yeah.
That this has started prior. It was anyone of this. And if you just go with the financial metric, maybe they are paid very well, but still they feel something's not. Okay?
Yeah.
So I think it's just important to look at factors and not just, I'm paying you. So anyway, what's the point? Anyway, so I wanted to just also point out or touch on those kinds of issues. Yeah. A man goes on that, it's not just about technique. Bassoon told me you can learn the skills and things, but then you have to be innovative, you have to be interpretive, you have to be creative. All of these things he got from the bassoon, at least according to his story, and then took them to medicine. And look, everyone I think would want to win the prize in medicine, those who are in that kind of area, or economics or other areas, and to get that recognition, partly because you think that that was the bassoon which did for you, is quite important. And that's what we don't measure. Okay? How that's basically is innovations. How have they changed the world? In terms, if his products are being exported to China, to Uganda, to South Africa, how is that captured? You don't even know that the very, very root of it had something to do with bassoon. We just see the final product.
Right.
So I think that's a very interesting way to look at it. And also, when you're looking at things like value added, you could be designing the Jordan Air basketball shoes. Okay? But you took, and actually this is a true story. I think some students have taken classes in design and want to design basketball shoes. Yeah? And they went to art school or designing school, which is really arts education, broadly speaking, if you look at it. But if you are buying these shoes and you like the design, don't think of this that actually someone used design or there's design behind someone who will study this. You just buy shoes, but
Right.
there are added product is in there. When you make a transaction, you think you are buying shoes, but there's another element. Yeah? And I've mentioned these things to do with phones and ringtones, even cars.
Right.
People design cars as a way. Who are these designers? They study art. Some of them maybe are self-taught, but even that could be arts education. But when we are buying this sleek BMW or Porsche, whatever, you don't realize that maybe someone had to design these kinds of things. So I think these are some of the indirect ways which basically is a see. But also using your example, if you're American and you pay taxes, and you are in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, you are in Dubai.
I'm in Dubai, yes.
And you are basically reporting your taxes to income to the US government, you are an international export. And you're teaching music, and that's international trade and services.
I never thought of it that
my
way.
book covered. Yes. So in chapter, I think, 4, 5, 6, this is the area where I talk about is this, and it's an example of international trade.
So when the U.S. says we're exporting X trillions of dollars of stuff, I'm part of that. I'm part of that trillion.
Yeah,
this.
Yes. Yeah, we don't realize, but also this has been said actually in the UK. You mentioned of British schools and America. In fact, when I think Mr. Trump was president, he didn't want to get all the students from China, trying to make it difficult for students from other countries, foreign countries, international students, especially those from China. And people complain, many economists pointed out, we benefit by exporting this education product. People come here to study, and that's our export. So what if some of these people, I went to school with some of the best Chinese pianists in the world, but some of them can, even if they got scholarship, someone is paying. If they pay for themselves, that's very easy to see. But you don't realize this is an export, okay? Where students are coming in to study, maybe they come to study drama, dance, or design, or things like that. And that's indeed a contribution of also the arts and arts education in international trade.
And because you went to Juilliard, right? Yes.
Yes.
Did you move from Uganda to New York?
No. And it was one of the best things which was great, because when you are up in Uganda, and I struggle with that because people think that you are rich. The things they show us on TV, everything's like Manhattan in Hollywood. But it's really not like that. So I ended up I first went to a small town in North Carolina.
Okay.
And I ended up there. Someone had me play piano in a hotel, and I ended up there. And someone is actually an African American gentleman who studied yoga at Howard, I think, and was working for the State Department, became friends with me because there are not many organs in Kampala.
Yeah.
So I would come to the cathedral where I grew up to practice. And because I knew how hard it was to try to find a place to practice, I would let him to practice. And he practiced. He would send me music, sometimes. So we became friends. When I landed in the States, he told me, Patrick, you are talented, you need to go to Juilliard. I never even knew what Juilliard was. And a lot of people don't know about me. I've gone to all these schools, which allegedly, I think, maybe seen as fancy, but actually I wanted to go to Berea College in Kentucky. But I never heard back. And of all the places I tried, some I didn't get in, some scholarship materialized. I auditioned for Juilliard, and that's where I got a full scholarship. And I went to Juilliard. So that's how I ended up at Juilliard.
Wow, that's wild. Some things are just for you. And, I'm of this belief that when something's for you, there's really nothing you can do. Whatever you believe, whatever higher power you believe in will take away everything else but was for you, So maybe you were just meant to go to
Yeah,
Juilliard.
yeah, and that's why I am become. This may be a little bit philosophical in a way, but I think I've become more like I don't really try to intervene in situations because many times for me when
Yeah.
doors close, actually, the other opportunities open. So basically, and
Right.
this is actually true. And I have some people when they use closed doors, but they will pass through windows to go to practice the piano. So I think that I don't, and maybe it's a weakness of some sort, but sometimes I really do. If things don't work out, I tend not to. I've learned that it's okay because you never know. Okay,
Right.
what other opportunities? It's okay because, and that's why I think that this entire thing of winner take all, I want it all, I think can use that as a kind of example. It's okay um,
Yeah.
for Jackson to go on the Supreme Court. Don't try to, because you don't agree with that. Maybe there will be something else which will come out of it, which will be positive.
Right.
What I'm saying that sometimes things don't need to go your way to get what may be the best outcome.
Right. I think people have a
In
hard
actually,
time. I think people have a hard
yes.
time considering an outcome that's not the one that they imagined.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, what I'll tell you, I'm a perfect example of where sometimes it's actually comes out better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in this scene, as because maybe I dwell so much on it, but in many, many cases, there have been times where, I will tell you, my book was going to be first published by a certain publisher, and abandoned it, and actually even Cambridge first maybe I thought it wasn't their cup of tea, but they end up publishing it, and I actually end up in a much better place.
Yeah.
Okay, because it was a better publisher than the initial. So sometimes you don't know. Okay,
You just don't
okay.
know. And there can be
So
power in not
I think
knowing.
I wanted to study with the professor so bad in Saudi Arabia, and I can't get a visa and stuff, and end up going to Dubai, and I meet Michael, and actually Michael becomes the best teacher I've ever had. So you never know.
Yeah. Hey.
So I think that that's the way I like to. And again, I think maybe I dwell so much on it, but it has taught me to be like, okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you never know. Yeah.
So as we move towards wrapping up, we've got about 15 minutes left in this room. I want to give our
Yes.
listeners a little insight into your session about misinformation and disinformation and how we can use arts education to tackle that. Something you said earlier made me think of in American discourse, there seems to be this inability of us to perceive a duality in anything.
Mm.
So an example, I had an example, but an example could be, um, I'm struggling to find an example, but everything seems to be either all the way this or all the way that. And I feel that
Yes.
that's that polarization that we always talk about so much, right? And when you don't
Yes.
have the ability to have any type of duality or any type of gray area, it makes it really hard to um, separate fact from fiction. It makes it really hard to make proper decisions, and it makes it really hard to listen. But I too feel that studying the arts, because in music, which is that's my art, there is not a lot of this or that. Maybe there is a big trombone melody, but there's a little flute ditty over here that's working its way up that's also important.
Yes.
There's not this
Yes.
or that mentality. So, could
Yes.
you give us a little insight into that session and kind of what it's going to be about?
Yeah, and also I was reading about that right before when I decided on that, and the text that was on the history of philosophy, and it really occurred to me that actually, you know what, this entire idea that you don't have time to sit down and think about something deep is causing us a lot of trouble because now I'm amazed I haven't checked my phone, but I'll tell you people are sending me text messages and this WhatsApp. They don't know that I'm
Yeah.
in an interview, thankfully. And that's the way it is. We can't focus. I mean, I think most of us, the attention, which I call the attention deficit disorder, is right there. And what has happened is that it's very easy for me, because you are my friend or in the same social group, to send me something, whether it's true or not. I just like it. Okay? But as you just mentioned, the arts can give us a chance to be like, okay, well, what if there's another way of looking at it? Okay? Let me take a back seat. Okay, well, this person is playing the melody. It's a little flute, but I have this trombone to drive them up. What if I let them shine because they have the melody to make the music better? And actually, one point which I think I would want to focus on is observation. The arts are, if we really look, they are wonderful ways to teach us to observe. Observe and listen. What is it that is going on? So if they send you things in music, for example, you can learn a piece, you can learn it very well, but doesn't guarantee that tomorrow you're not going to get a memory slip. You have to just go and check. And once you see that there are things which are not working out right, what was the reason? Did I miss a chord? What was there? Are there some spot? Is it the rhythm? Why is it not working out right? So you have to take things apart a lot of times, slowly, and analyze things slowly, and then put it back together. In fact, many of us, when I was a kid, I thought of practicing and playing things very fast meant that you know something very well, but that's a recipe for disaster. Many times, many teachers putting in arts education will tell you, break things apart. Look at it. Where is it going on? If you want to interpret even Chopin or other things, or even the African kind of melodies or African drumming rhythms, why is it sounding this way? Listen carefully. Okay? Pay attention to where it's going. Okay? Otherwise, if you just go through it, it's like, as one psychologist said, we eat things, but we don't taste them. We see
You're just swallowing
beautiful things, but we don't. So basically, this is the idea in that, okay, yes, with all this information, we put on the arts education part. So how can I understand where is this going? Okay? Is this really the best way to interpret it? What else has been said about this? Let me take it apart slowly and analyze where it's going. And then I can tell, okay, this is actually not true. It's misinformation. Or it's disinformation. Okay? It doesn't mean that if I can play the piece so fast, that I actually know it well. Okay? Okay? In that, it doesn't mean I can. For example, me, I'm a very slow texter, and I'm amazed I have people who either type, I don't know what they're like, but does that mean that what they are saying is correct because they can send out 200 tweets in a second?
It should actually be a red flag. Like I'm thinking it should be a red flag. Like if you're able to condense 100 years worth of history into a sound bite that's on Twitter, that should be an immediate red flag to people instead of what they flock to.
Yeah. So, and it's nothing wrong that is entirely negative, but the entire idea is that, okay, well, let's just take a moment to where did it come from?
Right.
Okay. It's like even going to the arts, I get your recording and I, remove your face or put my face and say, oh, Patrick played that. But people who know me, Patrick is never really Patrick. How did he?
Say, wait, Patrick doesn't play the cello?
Do that kind of
He plays.
So, I think, yes. So they are interpreting things and taking the things quickly and basically investigate what's going on. Or the other thing about it, which someone I think had mentioned in the book review of my book, which maybe for them they say it differently. I feel like, this entire thing which I've been told since I think I started touching an instrument, that the music score, if you have a music score, it's just a representation. The music is behind the score. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So don't just play notes. The music is behind the score.
Right.
In that, yes, get the note right then, but to make music, you have to move beyond the score. Think about it.
Like when you play Bach, that's my favorite example.
A meaning behind, look at it, what is it saying? Who sent it? Where did it come from? In which context? Then that way you can tackle. I think.
Then you're making music.
Or I hope we have a chance of really tackling some things. Yeah, at least disinformation and misinformation. This I will have a chance of getting around. This doesn't mean that all musicians don't fall for it, but it's like saying, as I like to say, like all economists are financially secure, or all doctors are healthy.
Right.
But the science or the practice behind it is really can be a wonderful way to help us see or apply, I think, to see how we can absorb information, at least, or work with information. Yes.
Yeah. I think my biggest problem with consuming information, and maybe other people feel this way too, is confirmation bias. You know,
Yes.
if you tell me there was a Harvard research paper that said that percussion is the greatest instrument ever created, I might believe you. You know, just but that's because I'm a percussionist, so I want that to be true. You know, if I told you the same thing about the organ, maybe you believe me. You know, but that's that confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And you know, hopefully the educators and myself who will be in this session will get some help with that because I'm really interested in that. And I teach in an international baccalaureate school, and one of the biggest things we have is research skills. And it's not research in the traditional sense of like being able to use the library or this and that, but it's just being able to sift through information and decide like, oh, this is Wikipedia, maybe it's not correct. This is a journal, maybe it's correct, or this is this. It's just kind of research in its basic sense. So for me to be able to kind of use some of the things that you're talking about, that's kind of important to me because I want my kids to be able to, you know, even their parents. I've heard some of my kids say um, some despicable things that are rooted in history and culture,
Mm.
and these are the same things that, you know, the slave owners' parents were telling them that they told their kids that they're telling my friends now, which is why things like
Mm.
critical race theory, like you said, are important, but also being
Mm.
able to use that art's lens to actually receive information properly is another way that I think can combat bigotry, combat misogyny, and things like that as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Patrick, I
Yeah,
want to
that's one thing.
say, oh, I'm sorry.
The one thing I want to, which you mentioned about, is the patience. Of course, constructive impatience is important, but sometimes to play well, but to be so patient to
Yeah.
try to really, you have to put in those hours or that time to try to get what you want, and that requires a lot. You can't just,
Right.
you know, quickly grab things and run. Um, and I think that's another virtue which the arts can teach us.
Yeah. I saw a joke once in a Facebook group. This person was asking, like, hey, I really want to learn the flute. What's the fastest way that I can learn the flute? Like, how can I learn the flute fast? And someone commented, build a time machine, then get inside of it with your flute and just fast forward like 25 years, then get out of the time machine, and then you'll be good at the flute. That's the fastest way you can do it.
Oh, and actually, you're bringing in something which is very interesting, which I love the art, in that it doesn't mean that if I know how I've played the piece very well now, that next week I'll do the same thing. It doesn't make sense. You can
Right.
learn a piece well. Yeah, I mean, when during my student years I could play all these kinds of pieces of music, now I have to go dig them up and try as if I've never touched them.
Right. It's
In
almost
a
like
way.
you've never
So
seen it
you
before.
have to constantly on refining things. And all these politicians, you can write me for me a speech and I can go give this wonderful speech. But you can't, you know, practice for me and I go play percussion like you, unless, who
Right.
knows, there will be that kind of effect to come up. I have to go. And if I didn't practice, it will show that
Right.
you really are not ready. So this is interesting. And actually, going back to China very quickly, I had a Chinese friend of mine, a wonderful pianist, who went to a competition, I think, in Texas, and they either stayed with the host family or had somebody who hosted him, and their son, I think, if I recall this correctly, said, how long does it take to play like you or win this kind of competition stuff? I think I can do it in 3 months. Don't you think 3 months I'll be also that good and I can go to Julian and win? Yeah, I was
Yep.
like,
3 months.
people who have been playing for years, maybe since he was 2 or something, or a kid, and to reach this level. Yeah, but this young man was thinking it's going to be just 3 months and it's going to be a virtuoso.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Patrick, I want to say thank you for your time. You see our little timers ticking up there. Everyone, this is Patrick Kabanda. April 30th, right here on CommonTime Online, Patrick will be delivering his session on misinformation and disinformation, and how we can use the arts to kind of change the way we look at things. So, Patrick, I want to say thank you. I appreciate your time, and it's always great talking with you.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time to speak with you, and enjoy your time in Abu Dhabi. And good night. I think it's good night for you now.
Yes.
And send greetings to your family. Yes.
I will. Thank you.
Bye bye.